Hello there fellow acolytes of the Sega Saturn, and welcome to yet another Saturn Gems video, the series where we look at a variety of different gems for the Sega Saturn, from cheap games to expensive games, to imports, to local, to hidden gems, to things that everyone knows about. Hopefully there's something there that everyone can enjoy. Well, we're going to get started now with a game that was a launch title for the Saturn, and that is Clockwork Night. Clockwork Night puts you in the shoes of Pepperu Chow as he goes through a house in various stages and tries to rescue the princess. You have a nice variety of levels. You go through, bedrooms and finish up in the attic, I believe. And you take out a variety of cool little enemies that are quite well designed, and some nice bosses. The levels themselves have got some interesting gimmicks, some of which involve your keyblade, which is a sword that's literally a key, as you'd expect. To be honest, the levels themselves aren't particularly special. They're solid enough and they're enjoyable enough. But where it's really at is the bosses. The bosses in this game have a lot of charm, and they're, really what makes the game worth playing, to be honest, in my opinion. The bosses are strange, and they're all kind of based around various different toys. But, working out how to beat them is actually pretty fun. The game itself, it's not very expensive, and I think it had a lot of copies made, so you shouldn't have trouble finding this. It's something that you can pick up for a pretty reasonable price, and I would say if you can, then grab it. There are Japanese versions which are a lot cheaper. It's still quite a cheap game, but if you get the Japanese version, it's not really going to make any difference, to be honest. So if you don't really want to spend money on an above average platformer, then maybe do that instead. I'd say if you're a Saturn owner, it's definitely worth playing, but you probably don't want to spend too much money on it. I can't imagine it'll ever reach, Panzer Dragoon Saga highs of price. But, if you can pick it up for like 20 quid or something, then yeah, grab it. Next game on my list is quite a well-known game, and it's a game that a lot of people say is one of the best on the system. I would disagree with that, but it's still, definitely a lot of fun. And that's Sega Rally Championship. Again, this was quite an early title. It could have been a launch title. Sega Rally Championship is effectively what you play in all those, on those arcades. I'm sure everyone has played Sega Rally Championship in the arcade during their childhood, or at least people of my age will have done. And it's pretty much exactly the same as the arcade, apart from you're not sat in a massive arcade cabinet in order to play it. And it's pretty good. It doesn't have a massive load of levels. There are 4 levels. The good thing is, because the levels are very well designed, you don't really need that many more. However, because there are only 4 levels, that's where I feel that the game is sort of held back. It is a good game, and it's something that you can pick up for very cheap, but I would never put it in like my top 5 list for the Saturn, just purely because there's very little content there. It is something that you probably will replay, but I kind of feel like, playing the same levels again and again just don't really hook you as much. Of course, trying to do it and get faster times and stuff is quite neat, but I don't think it's got quite enough content there in order to justify being one of the best games on the system. There's another game I'm going to talk about a little bit later, which again doesn't have a massive amount of content, but what it does is so much better that I think that one justifies more of a purchase than Sega Rally. But the good thing with Sega Rally, as I say, is it's dirt cheap, so it's definitely worth grabbing. It handles really well. and plays exactly as you'd expect compared to the arcade version. The next game on my list is a game that's actually available on quite a number of platforms, but this was actually quite revolutionary for the time because nobody thought it was possible. But a company that we've covered in the past, Lobotomy Software, ported this title over, Duke Nukem 3D. They put it in the slave driver engine, so it is different to, the standard Duke Nukem 3D engine that you'll play on PC, and it is noticeable in some places that it is a different engine. But they've recreated it very, very well. It controls just like Exhumed, and that plays really well, even on a 2T controller. The levels are pretty much exactly as the same as the PC version, more or less. I believe there are some slight tweaks here and there to, ensure that it runs smoothly on the system. But it does. I mean, it runs at a great frame rate, it controls really well, and it plays pretty much like the PC version. If you're a fan of Duke Nukem 3D, it's definitely a version worth picking up, to be honest. There is also a bonus game mode on some versions, which is known as Death Tank, and that as well is a nice little diversion for anyone that wants to play it. But to be honest, the game itself is worth playing just by itself, because the game is quite cheap, probably 20 quid and you'll be able to pick it up, but it's as fun as the PC version. The only gripe I have is that episode 4 from the PC version isn't present in this, and it's a little bit of a shame because for me that's my favourite episode of Duke Nukem 3D, but you've still got the first 3 episodes. They play just as well as you'd imagine. It's a lot of fun. The next game on my list is a Japanese only game, and that's Vampire Savior, which is also known as Darkstalkers 3 if you've played it on the PlayStation. The previous game, Darkstalkers 2, did get a release in the West, and there is a PAL version of it, but the third game, Darkstalkers 3, didn't get a release in the West. It's only available to play in Japan. Now, Darkstalkers 3, or Vampire Savior, is a Capcom fighting game and plays exactly as you would expect from a Capcom fighting game. It's buttery smooth, the sprites themselves look absolutely amazing, and it's a blast to play. To be honest, the fighting genre is something that I suck at, and as such I find that the only fighting games I actually enjoy are the ones with interesting characters. Something like Virtua Fighter I can appreciate, is a good game. Same with the likes of Street Fighter. I can appreciate that the quality of the engine and how it plays is fantastic. However, because I suck at them and I find using, trying to pull off the different combos is quite difficult, it's not a genre I particularly enjoy that much. That's why I try and look for games with interesting characters, so I can then appreciate for the crazy characters and the crazy attacks and stuff. And this game definitely fits into that criteria. It's sort of a Halloween themed fighting game. So you have things like Little Red Riding Hood, you have a succubus, you have like a pharaoh type fella, there's a yeti, there's like a woman who's like a bee or something. It's, it's quite a strange cast of characters, but, they all have their charm. It's something that, I can play as these characters and I can just enjoy it for the spectacle. But I can also appreciate that there's, really good mechanics behind it as well, like with the Street Fighter games. So if you are a hardcore fighting fan, it's something that you'll play and you'll enjoy. So I would definitely recommend this game to anyone that's a fan of fighting games or, like me, just dabbles a little bit. The final game on our list is actually a game by Sonic Team, and that's Burning Rangers. Burning Rangers was a relatively late release for the Saturn library, but as such, it's not only in 3D, but it's gorgeous and utilises the Saturn's capability pretty well. Now, Burning Rangers puts you in the role of a futuristic firefighter as you try and navigate various different areas and put out fires. You also rescue different survivors, and at the end of each area you fight a boss. You also have a jetpack in order to navigate certain areas, and the whole mechanics of the game is pretty interesting and also pretty fun. You use your jetpack to fly across these areas, you use your gun to put out fires, and putting out fires will leave behind gems. Now, gems have different functions. First, they act like a sort of health system, which works in the same way as Sonic the Hedgehog. So if you get hit, you lose your gems, and then you can pick some of them up. It also has a function for rescuing survivors. If you have a certain amount of gems, you can rescue survivors, and then a little bit more, and you can activate that survivor as effectively a checkpoint. And finally, the number of gems you have also works on point system, so that with a number of other factors like how fast you beat the boss and how much the fire you put out, it can get you a higher score as well. Going through the different environments is quite fun. You have space stations. There's like an underwater kind of facility, which is quite interesting. There's an area with fire. There's some quite varied locations. The main gripe that a lot of people have with the game, though, is that even though it does have a variety of different locations, there aren't many of them. Now, unlike with something like Sega Rally Championship, the way the game tries to counteract that is by randomizing. Once you beat the game for the first time, replaying the level randomizes the layout, so that the doors may be locked a second time round and you'll have to find other routes through the facility. Also as well, the survivors are in different locations. You've got different survivors to actually find, which is good in itself, because when you rescue different survivors, they fill up your survivor notebook. Filling the survivor notebook, I don't think actually unlocks anything, but it's still a neat thing that you can check through the menu, and it's a nice thing to do. If you're not a fan of replaying levels though, and you don't like these kind of arcade experiences, you may find that the game is a bit short-lived, but you'll probably still enjoy it. As I say, the game itself is fantastic fun, the music is excellent, and yeah, it's well worth grabbing. The main issue with Burning Rangers, however, now is the price. The Japanese version is reasonably priced. However, the English version is starting to get up there. I think at the moment, at the time of speaking, it's around £80. However, I would say it's definitely worth picking up. The good thing is this was released in a plastic case as well, so you get a nice case for it to be in rather than the crappy cardboard cases. And the English version will allow you to appreciate the story, because there is a story to the game, and it's a reasonably good story. There are some anime cutscenes which are excellent, and throughout the game there's like a navigational system, which is another reason to have the English version for, because as the levels do get randomized, you rely on that navigational system just to tell you where you need to go and which routes are available and which routes are locked. You'll pretty much rely on that in order to get good scores. But yeah, I mean, if you're not amazingly keen on arcade experiences, then perhaps opt for the Japanese version instead, because that game is a reasonable price. But I would say get the English version, and I would actually recommend getting the English version sooner rather than later, just purely because when I bought the game last year, I think it was, I got it for maybe 30 quid, and now it's almost tripled in price. so you probably want to get it before it becomes even more expensive. Those were the games that we covered this time. We had Clockwork Night, Sega Rally Championship, Duke Nukem 3D, Vampire Savior, and Burning Rangers. Have you played any of these games? If so, tell me what you think in the comments below, and if you have any other suggestions, then pop them down as well. Okay, thanks all for watching. Till next time, bye.